Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here, so thank you so much for coming today. The United States, as everyone knows, is a strong supporter of Security Council Resolution 1325 and the 4 follow-up resolutions on women, peace, and security. In fact, the United States introduced 3 of the follow-up resolutions on women, peace, and security. Now, you might ask, if we're such a strong supporter of women, peace, and security resolutions, why did it take us 10 years to develop a national action plan? That's a legitimate question. For a long time, we in the US government, we said, you know, instead of kind of wasting our time or spending our time writing a national action plan, developing a national action plan, we wanted to focus on implementation of Security Council resolutions on women, peace, and security. Because we knew it would be a really long and arduous process to get all the government agencies together to develop a plan. But we finally came to realize that if you don't have a plan, it's pretty hard to implement something. And so we realized that we really needed to develop a plan. We had strong encouragement from the non-governmental organizations, and they said, we really, you know, the US really has to get off the dime and develop a plan. I often like to say that NGOs, they inform and they inspire us. But I have to admit, in this case, you could also say they instructed us as well to develop a plan. So at the 10th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325, the 10th anniversary was in 2010, Secretary Clinton announced that the United States would develop a plan to accelerate implementation of the Resolution 1325 across our government and with our partners in civil society. To digress for a moment, I was involved in the Beijing Women's Conference in 1995. And as we were preparing for the Beijing Women's Conference, the UN Secretariat used to say to us, you know, preparing for the conference is as important as the conference itself. Because in preparing for the conference, we're going to get men and women, governments and non-governmental organizations to work together to figure out ways to advance the status of women. And so that's really as important as getting together in Beijing for the conference. And I think you could almost say the same about the National Action Plan. Developing the plan forced us to think about what we need to do to engage women in peace building. And it forced us to work together with our partners at U.S. Agency for International Development, at Department of Defense, at the White House, and with civil society, so that we could think about what policies and programs we need to change or implement or adopt or whatever. Our plan is based on the 4 pillars that the United Nations identified as important for women, peace, and security. It's the 3 Ps and the R&R. The 3 Ps are participation, prevention, protection, and then relief and recovery. And I'll go into those a little bit later. Now, the U.S. National Action Plan it represents a whole of government commitment. It was coordinated by the National Security Staff at the White House. And at first it involved just 3 agencies, State Department, Defense Department, and USAID. But the number of agencies that are involved in implementing the National Action Plan now has grown quite substantially. It includes the Treasury Department, Justice Department, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, as well as the Centers for Disease Control and the Peace Corps, and the U.S. Trade Representative. So it's really a whole of government approach. And you've probably heard this if you're a policy wonk, like I'm sure most of you are as well. Hillary Clinton has said this a million times, that in engaging women in peace building, it's not just the right thing to do, it's not just a nice thing to do, it's not as though we're doing women a favor by letting them participate in peace building, but it actually is crucial to achieving peace. We can't really do it with just half the population and with all the talents of women. So again, it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. On December, the United States rolled out the National Action Plan on December 19th, just a couple of months ago. And 3 days before we rolled out the National Action Plan, Secretary Clinton spoke at the International Crisis Group. And when she spoke at the International Crisis Group, she wanted to really lay out why it's so important to have women involved in peace building. A lot of people say, well, what difference does it make? And she wanted to make the case why it's so crucial to have women involved. And she said, like, from Northern Ireland to Liberia to Nepal to many places in between, women bring special skills to the negotiating table, and they bring special talents that are often overlooked in the formal peace agreements. For instance, women will bring up the issues of human rights, justice, national reconciliation, economic renewal, and these are issues that are critical to making peace, but sometimes when you get people in a room together, they don't think about these issues. They just think about, well, how do we stop the violence? And I have to tell you, Don Steinberg, who is a person I like to quote often, he used to be our ambassador to Angola. He's been so involved in women, peace, and security issues, and now he's the deputy administrator of USAID. He often says that peace agreements are usually men with guns forgiving other men with guns for crimes they committed against women. And peace agreements have to be more than that. They have to be not only how do we stop the fighting, but how do we build a peaceful community. Now, one of the things that Hillary Clinton also said is that if you look at it, the way the international community is trying to build peace, right now it's just not working. Because too often women are excluded not only from the peace negotiations, but also from the institutions that build the peace afterwards. And so even if there were no proof that women are important, maybe we should at least try to do something different from the way we're doing things. So for so many reasons, it's important to try to include women in peace negotiations and peace building. I'll just say a little bit more about our National Action Plan. Okay, as I mentioned, it touches upon prevention, protection, participation, and relief and recovery. On prevention, our National Action Plan identifies ways in which we will partner with women in vulnerable areas to prevent conflicts from breaking out in the first place. On protection, we will strengthen ways to protect women in conflicts. And when we talk about protection, we shouldn't think, well, women are the weaker sex and that's why they need protection. The reason women need protection is because their human rights are not universally recognized, let alone protected or promoted. So this is why we need to protect women from sexual and gender-based violence during conflict. The third is women's participation. We want to make sure that women participate in peace building, conflict resolution, in political processes so that they're involved before, during, and after conflict. And the fourth is on relief and recovery. We want to make sure that we incorporate a gender perspective in relief and recovery in order to provide safe and equal access to humanitarian assistance. So in addition to the 4 pillars identified by the United Nations, the United States has come up with a 5th pillar as well. And the 5th pillar is called institutionalization. How do we institutionalize the women, peace, and security agenda throughout the US government? And I happen to believe that institutionalizing this throughout the US government is actually going to be one of the most difficult and challenging parts of the National Action Plan. I think it'll be kind of relatively easy to identify actions to address the other 4 pillars, but when it comes to institutionalizing, I think it's going to be difficult. Because when we institutionalize effort, we have to make sure that people in the US government and in conflict-affected countries really believe that it makes a difference to include women. And it's probably analogous to voting. Okay, a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to vote because I don't think it makes a difference. And I think if people thought it would make a difference, they would vote in greater numbers. So I happen not to agree with them that it doesn't make a difference. But people, in order to get out to vote, they really have to believe it makes a difference. And I think in order for people within the US government and in conflict countries as well, they have to say, well, it will make a difference. We have a better chance of achieving peace if women are included. So in addition to having, okay, as you know, the National Action Plan was released in December 19th, but part of the National Action Plan says that State Department, USAID, and DoD, Department of Defense, will each develop agency implementation plans, like specific tasks that they are going to implement in order to implement the National Action Plan. And so we are working on those State Department, DoD, and USAID implementation plans right now. And so as soon as we thought we could take a breather after the National Action Plan, and we're back working like crazy now. And we hope to release our agency implementation plans June 1st. I would like to say just a couple of words about UN leadership. And the United Nations has really been such a leader in all of these areas. First of all, the United Nations provided a forum for member states to get together to even address this issue. But in addition to providing a forum, the work that has been done by UN Women, by the Special Representative, the Secretary General on conflict, on violence and conflict, by the Department of Peacekeeping Affairs, by the Department of Political Affairs, by UNDP, has been phenomenal. They've developed indicators so we can measure our progress. They've actually highlighted the issue of sexual and gender-based violence. They've come out with guidelines on how to have ceasefire agreements to make sure that sexual and gender-based violence is included in ceasefire agreements. So they've really just been an absolute leader, and I really have to admit I'm deeply indebted to the United Nations for all the wonderful work that they've done. So just in summary, of all the member states of the United Nations, there are 193 of us? All right, okay. Only 34 countries have actually developed national action plans. And then in addition, the European Union and NATO have action plans as well. And even though we are thrilled about having developed a national action plan, as Secretary Clinton said when she announced that we would do one, we would prepare one, she said, action plans are only a step towards a larger goal, and that ultimately we must measure our progress by the improvements in the daily lives of people around the world. That must be our cause, and empowering women to contribute all their talents to this cause is our calling. And so definitely we are committed to not only developing the plan, but implementing the plan, and we know that civil society organizations will hold us accountable. So thank you so much.